Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really dynamic day from the markets, July 18th, 2025.
That's right.
We've got a packed market wrap called Tariff Tsunami, Fed Fights, and Tech Tumbles to break down our goal. Cut through the noise for you?
Exactly. We're here to pull out the core insights from that day's action, really connect the dots, and show you the why behind the headlines. It's your shortcut to being truly informed without getting swamped.
And it was quite a day. We're going to give you the full picture. We'll look at the stock market hovering near records, then Netflix earnings, why good news wasn't, quite good enough. Then we plunge into the tariff storm heating up, the political drama around the Fed, and a really interesting shift in energy rig counts.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting with the broad market on July 18th. It was kind of a day of consolidation, really.
Yeah, felt that way.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average, it slipped about 0.5%. But interestingly, both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ composite, they kind of held near the flat line.
Right near those record highs from Thursday, though. Exactly. Settling in just below those all-time closing highs. There was some economic strength providing a bit of buoyancy, but Netflix's earnings, which we'll get to, they didn't add any fuel. We also got some pretty interesting data from the University of Michigan Consumer Survey.
Ah, yes, the sentiment numbers.
Yeah, and the big thing was one-year inflation expectations. They plunged to 4.4% in July. That's down from 5% in June.
Which is a pretty significant drop.
It really is, especially when you think those expectations hit, what was it, a 4-decade high of 6.6% just back in May?
Wow. Yeah.
And the longer run ones, 5 to 10 years out, they also fell to 3.6% from 4%. The survey even said consumers' worst fears about tariff inflation seemed to be fading a bit, though the main sentiment index itself, 61.8, was only slightly up from June's 60.7.
Okay, so what's fascinating here, right, is seeing that interplay, even with the Dow down a bit.
Yeah.
Those falling inflation expectations, they kind of provided this underlying strength.
Yeah.
It tells you that while one stock like Netflix can disappoint, the bigger picture on inflation and maybe some hope for trade stability, well, that's a powerful driver for overall market confidence.
Okay, and switching gears over to crypto. July 18th, a huge day. The total crypto market cap topped $4 trillion for the very first time.
Incredible number.
Huge milestone. Bitcoin, though, it did pull back a bit, slipping below $118,000 on Friday, kind of taking a breather after the S&P and NASDAQ hit their highs.
Makes sense.
And a big driver for this crypto milestone was the passage of the Genius Act. That's the legislation setting up a regulatory framework for stablecoins. President Trump was actually expected to sign it Friday afternoon.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, that Bitcoin pullback,
Right.
probably just some profit taking after hitting such a huge market cap number, normal stuff.
Yeah.
But the Genius Act, that's the real long-term story here, getting regulatory clarity for stablecoins. I mean, that could unlock huge new opportunities and partnerships in crypto. It really signals a maturing market,
So, boiling it down for you, the listener, Friday's stock market showed consolidation near records, and it was really helped by those fading inflation fears in the consumer data.
Yeah.
Keep watching how trade policy keeps shaping that confidence.
Definitely.
And for crypto, $4 trillion market cap, the Genius Act that points towards increasing legitimacy, long-term growth potential, even if Bitcoin took a short-term dip. Okay, let's talk earnings. One of the biggest reports everyone was watching, Netflix. NFLX.
Always a big one. Kicks off tech earnings.
Exactly, and they actually topped second quarter revenue expectations. Came in at $11.08 billion. That's up 17.3% year over year, and it was above their own guidance of $11.04 billion.
It's all beat.
And EPS, earnings per share, also strong, $7.19. They had forecast $7.03, and it was way up from $4.88 a year ago. So, sounds great.
I think it should be.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Despite these solid beats, Netflix shares slipped over 4% shortly after the open on Friday. I saw this great note title from William Blair analyst Ralph Schacart, he called it, "Good quarter, but tough to surpass high expectations."
Huh. Sums it up perfectly.
Yeah, he added, and I'm quoting here, "An overall good set of results and guide were not good enough for elevated expectations." And you got to remember, the stock trades at like 40 times forward earnings. That's a steep premium.
It really is. It's that classic price to perfection scenario, isn't it? Investors just set the bar incredibly high.
Totally.
So yeah, the headline numbers looked good, but maybe when you dig in, like operating margin, for instance, it only went up slightly to 29.5% for the full-year guidance.
Right.
Investors holding a stock with that kind of valuation might have been hoping for, I don't know, 30%, maybe even 31%. That tiny difference, it sounds small, but it can really disappoint a market that's expecting the moon.
And looking ahead, Netflix did give upbeat guidance for Q3. They expect revenue at $11.53 billion, which is above analyst estimates, and EPS at $6.87, also beating expectations.
So the outlook is still positive.
Yeah, and for the full year 2025, they bumped up their revenue forecast, now expecting between $44.8 billion and $45.2 billion. They said part of that was the weaker U.S. dollar recently, plus just continued business momentum.
Makes sense.
And a huge driver they talked about for the longer term, ads.
The ad tier.
Executives expect ad revenue to roughly double to about $3 billion in 2025. And they also recently hiked prices on several U.S. plans, including that ad plan, though it's still pretty cheap at $7.99 a month.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Netflix's strategy, expanding ads, tweaking prices, even leveraging currency moves, that's all crucial for long-term growth. So even if the market reacted negatively right away because of those, elevated expectations, the underlying business trends look pretty robust.
So what's the takeaway for you, the learner? Netflix's stock slip, even with strong earnings, it's a perfect example of how those high expectations can punish even good results, especially for high-flying tech stocks. It's a key lesson. A company can do well, but if it's priced for perfection, it needs to be better than perfect for the market sometimes. Expect some near-term tech volatility until we hear from the other big names. All right, now let's shift to the tariff tsunami. Big topic. President Trump reportedly getting plans ready for a double whammy of tariffs, slated to kick in by August 1st.
Double whammy, okay.
Yeah, includes industry-specific duties. They're set to release details on a planned 50% duty on copper. And at the same time, these so-called reciprocal levies are supposed to start on stuff from over 100 countries.
Okay, so reciprocal tariffs, just to be clear, basically means duties designed to match tariffs that other countries put on U.S. goods, trying to level the playing field, so to speak.
Right.
But this two-pronged approach, specific duties plus these broad reciprocal ones, that's aimed at really reshaping global trade by penalizing imports. Big ripple effects.
And it's escalating with the EU, too. There's a big push now for a minimum 15-20% blanket EU tariff. That's up from an earlier idea of 10%.
Wow, that's a jump.
And Trump's threatened the EU with 30% duties starting August 1st. The EU, well, they're not happy. They're looking at retaliation, maybe new taxes on U.S. digital services or even curbs on U.S. investments.
Digital services tax, that's serious.
They're even apparently stalling an investigation into Elon Musk's X. Seems like they don't want to poke the bear during these talks.
A delicate situation.
And then on battery materials, huge news. The U.S. announced preliminary anti-dumping duties of 93.5% on graphite imports from China.
93.5%.
Yeah, and that's on top of existing rates, so the effective tariff is like 160%. And China just dominates graphite processing, which is key for EV battery anodes, right?
Absolutely critical.
So naturally, stocks of battery material makers jumped. Sierra Resources was up like 38%, POSCO Future M up 24%.
Yeah, you can see the connection there. That graphite tariff, it really highlights this strategic push to secure critical supply chains, especially for EVs. It's about national security, economic independence.
Makes sense.
And the EU potentially hitting back. That just shows how these trade fights can spiral and spread way beyond just goods into services, investment, everything.
Meanwhile, a little bit of resolution elsewhere. Canada and New Zealand settled their dairy dispute. Canada made some technical changes to its quotas after a panel said their rules unfairly limited New Zealand's access.
Okay, one dispute resolved.
But Canada's got its own friction now. China urged Canada to drop new steel import curbs and threatened countermeasures.
The steel issue again.
Yeah, Canada announced a new tariff rate quota for steel imports from places other than the U.S., plus extra 25% tariffs on non-U.S. steel that contains Chinese melted and poured steel, trying to protect their own industry from steel diverted by U.S. tariffs, basically.
So this raises that important question about the ripple effect, right? One country's tariffs, like Trump's, directly cause other countries to put up their own shields. You end up with this incredibly complex web of restrictions messing with supply chains everywhere.
And you really see the impact on companies. Alcoa, biggest U.S. aluminum producer, said Canadian tariffs cost them $115 million in Q2. That's 6 times more than Q1.
Wow.
Rio Tinto, Canada's biggest aluminum producer, reported over $300 million in costs in the first half from U.S. tariffs. Even ASML, the chip equipment giant, warned about 2026 growth, partly blaming tariff uncertainty.
Yeah, that uncertainty is killer for planning.
Though it's not hitting everyone the same. 3M, for instance, said they expect a smaller hit from tariffs this year. And while all this is going on, Trump also talked new deals, like one with Indonesia. Their goods face a 19% U.S. tariff, but U.S. goods face no tariff there.
Interesting trade-off.
And Indonesia committed to buying $15 billion in U.S. energy, $4.5 billion in U.S. farm products, and 50 Boeing jets. Trump also floated maybe 10–15% tariff rates for like 150 smaller U.S. trade partners.
Okay, so pulling this all together for you, the learner.
Yeah.
The tariff situation is incredibly complex, incredibly volatile. It directly hits supply chain costs, company profits.
Yep.
You should definitely anticipate shifts in which sectors do well. Some might benefit from protection, others face huge cost hikes. The whole global trade system is clearly in flux right now. Lots of risk, maybe some opportunity, but definitely need to stay sharp.
Okay, moving on now to monetary policy. Fed watch time.
Always important.
President Trump has kept up his attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, recently criticizing the $2.5 billion renovation of the Fed's headquarters and renewing talk about firing him.
The renovation story again.
Yeah, and what's kind of fascinating, or maybe ironic, is that reports show Trump's own appointees back in 2020 were the ones pushing for more white Georgia marble in that renovation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even when the Fed's architects actually preferred glass walls for transparency. And the project does have about $600 million in cost overruns, which the White House is calling mismanagement of taxpayer dollars.
So the political narrative there is pretty interesting when you see the backstory, right? I mean, the costs are high, sure. But the marble, which is now part of the attack, was apparently influenced by his own team. Kind of muddies the water if you're trying to use it as a clean reason to fire Powell. Yeah. It shows how these political fights get layered.
But politics aside, how easy is it to actually fire a Fed chair? The legal hurdles seem pretty significant.
They are. The Federal Reserve Act is key here. It says board members serve for 14 years unless sooner removed for cause by the president.
For cause, that's the phrase.
Exactly. And Powell himself has said pretty clearly he wouldn't leave if Trump tried, stating his removal is, quote, not permitted by law.
So what does for cause really mean in practice?
Well, that clause is specifically designed to shield the Fed from political meddling.
Right.
To protect its independence.
Right.
Now, there was a recent Supreme Court ruling that was a bit ambiguous, allowed Trump to fire board members at other independent agencies temporarily. But the big precedent is still a 1935 case, Humphrey's Executive v. U.S. That case really limits the president's power to fire officials at independent agencies, unless there's actual neglect of duty or malfeasance, real wrongdoing. So that gives Powell a pretty strong layer of legal protection.
So why do the markets hang on every word of this drama?
Because uncertainty around the Fed's leadership and its independence is huge for markets. Imagine Powell being replaced. His successor would face this bizarre dual mandate, right?
Trying to please the White House.
While also trying to maintain the Fed's credibility and independence. That's a tough spot. And it directly impacts market certainty, expectations about interest rates, everything.
And adding another layer, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller, who people mention as a possible Powell replacement next year, he just made his strongest call yet for a rate cut in July.
Yeah, that underscores a real divide within the Fed itself right now.
So the takeaway for you listening, this ongoing political tension around the Fed and Powell creates real uncertainty for monetary policy. Understanding those legal protections for Fed independence and watching the internal debates, like Waller calling for a cut, that's going to be crucial for trying to anticipate future rate decisions and how they'll impact the economy and your portfolio. Market jitters are likely until there's more clarity. Okay, let's wrap up with a quick look at the energy sector, Energy Snapshot. Baker Hughes reported on July 18th that U.S. energy firms added oil and natural gas rigs. First time in 12 weeks they added rigs.
Finally an uptick.
Yeah, the total count was up by 7 rigs to 544. But the breakdown is where it gets interesting. Gas rigs, up by 9. That's their biggest weekly jump since July 2023. They hit 117, the most since March 2024.
Big move in gas rigs.
But oil rigs actually fell by 2, down to 422. That's their lowest count since September 2021.
Huh. So real divergence there.
Definitely.
And that big jump in gas rigs, the biggest in a year, that's almost certainly driven by the EIA, the U.S. Energy Information Administration. They're projecting spot gas prices to jump, what, 68% in 2025?
Yeah, a huge forecast.
So producers are clearly looking at that potential profit and shifting resources, chasing the money.
But even with this week's overall increase, the total rig count is still down 42 rigs, about 7% compared to this time last year.
Still lagging behind.
Yeah, even in places like Texas and the Permian Basin, the big oil areas, rig counts fell to their lowest since October 2021.
So connecting this to the bigger energy picture, it tells you a lot about where energy companies are focusing their capital right now.
How so?
Well, even though the EIA expects crude oil production to rise a bit, from 13.2 million barrels per day this year to maybe 13.4 million next year,
Right?
the oil rig count is still bumping along at multi-year lows. It shows this continued focus on discipline, right? Boosting shareholder returns, paying down debt, rather than just drilling like crazy to boost output.
Right.
We've seen that trend since 2023, really.
Okay, so the takeaway for you watching the energy markets, this latest rig data signals a clear shift towards natural gas production, really driven by that strong price outlook. And while oil production is expected to nudge higher, that low oil rig count suggests supply might stay tighter relative to demand. This split could mean more volatility, especially in natural gas prices. Definitely something to watch how these different supply stories play out.
It's really fascinating when you step back and pull all these threads together from just one day.
It really is.
You had the market sort of treading water near records, but really influenced by those subtle shifts in inflation expectations. You had Netflix showing us exactly how price-to-perfection stocks can react, even to decent news.
The expectations game.
We dove deep into that incredibly complex and escalating tariff situation, copper, graphite, the EU, Canada, China, and the real costs hitting companies like Alcoa and ASML.
Major geopolitical shifts happening.
And then, of course, the constant political drama between the White House and the Fed and what that means for monetary policy. And finally, that really interesting divergence in the energy sector with the pivot towards natural gas rigs. So what this all means for you, the listener, is that in today's world, everything's connected, right? Understanding how economic data, earnings reports, geopolitics, and Fed policy all interact, it's not just helpful anymore, it's essential.
Absolutely.
This day, July 18th, really highlights how fast things can change and why you absolutely have to think critically about the information hitting your screen.
Well said. Okay, now for a final provocative thought for you to mull over. With these global tariff conflicts intensifying, especially targeting critical materials in key sectors, how might that fundamentally reshape global supply chains over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? And what kind of long-term opportunities or risks does that create for businesses and investors worldwide?
Ooh, good question. Lots to think about there.
Definitely something to chew on. And if you want to keep up with these fast-moving daily insights and get more of this data-driven market analysis, you should absolutely check out the original TradeFuse podcast.
Yeah, great source.
Subscribe for their weekday market wraps, and they also do Thursday live casts for even deeper dives into these crucial market insights. You won't want to miss it.